Hello everybody, John here from the esports department, ready to go over tonight's 4-game LPL LCK slate, and I gotta say, this is one of the toughest slates that I've seen in a while. Like a really, really tough slate. But fun, because there's a lot of different options, a lot of different things you can do, but it is extremely hard. There's like literally not a match that I think there's like a decisive, clear victor. All four matches are pretty up in the air. I think I can make pretty good arguments for any of the underdogs being favorites, or at least close to it. This is a really, really tough slate where you're kind of going to be able to do whatever you want. I mean, I guess in that sense, it's not a tough slate. You're going to be able to do whatever you want on this slate, and it's going to be reasonable, I think. Like, there's not really going to be any combination of two teams where I would look at your lineup and be like, "Oh, I don't know about this one." Like, I think you could play pretty much anybody. It starts off with BLG minus 175 against LNG plus 135. Interesting. If you look at the stats from last season, because these teams ran it back, other than BLG theoretically upgrading its support with PP God. But if you look at the stats from last season, 1788 to 1770, minus 11 to minus 69, 5160 to 3942, same dragon percentage, 18% higher in Herald. LNG was just better at everything than BLG last season. The only change is that BLG got PP God, but LNG looked quite good in their first match. Don't get me wrong, BLG looked alright too. BLG's 0-1, but they had a much tougher matchup. They played EDG, where LNG had to play Victory 5, a much easier matchup. That said, I mean, you can make a pretty reasonable argument here that LNG should be the favorites. I mean, I think probably they should be. I mean, these are two teams that are going to end up right next to each other in the standings, I think. Like, that's roughly where I have them. I think there's a pretty reasonable argument that LNG should be the favorite here. And they're sitting at plus 135. Their pricing, I kind of have not really looked that much at the pricing on the slate, so let's do that while we're doing this, because I think it's kind of interesting. Yeah, LNG's so cheap, at least Ale. Yeah, they're so cheap. Wow, yeah, they're so cheap. Okay, I mean, it's tough not to like LNG. Like I say, I mean, I think they really maybe should be the favorite in this matchup, and they're slight underdogs and very, very cheap on DraftKings. Kind of hard to avoid them. Both sides of the matchup make some sense. I don't think you could really go wrong. The only thing about this matchup is that LNG last split was not really a team you wanted to target. BLG has a tendency to be that way as well, so maybe this is one that you're not looking to get into your lineups, but both sides are definitely reasonable. They're just not something I don't know that I'm really like excited about either side, but they're both reasonable. The next one's Sunning minus 155 against WE plus 120. Same thing here. Offseason, WE gets an upgrade. Sunning stays the same, but didn't look exceptional in their first match. They played IG. They looked fine. They didn't look exceptional, though. And once again, if we look at stats from last season, I mean, it's pretty close. 1861 to 1851, 117 to 138. First turret advantages for WE, first blood advantages for Sunning, same dragon percentage, higher herald percentage for WE, better at 15 minutes for WE, and WE upgraded in the offseason. So it's another matchup where I feel like you could make a reasonable argument that WE is actually the favorite, and they're an underdog. Price-wise, WE slightly like on the cheaper side, but yeah, this is another matchup where either side of the matchup seems reasonable to play, especially in GPPs. I kind of think the underdog is actually the favorite. It's another one cut from the same cloth. I'll tell you the real struggle I'm having with this slate in a little bit, because I am having one real struggle with this slate. But third matchup of the day, Afrika Freaks minus 210 up against Fred and Brion plus 165. For me, this is probably the most decisive favorite on the slate, and they're not even a decisive favorite. I mean, Fred and Brion looked very good in their first match, came out and won. Afrika we haven't seen yet this season, and they underperformed all expectations last season. So despite the fact that Afrika is minus 210, and I think that maybe they're not actually minus 210. Like, if I was making the lines, I think I would put them more like minus 140, minus 130 maybe. And that might be the biggest favorite on the slate for me. It's kind of really tough on this slate, because you can see last season, I mean, Afrika was just significantly better last season. But the thing is, with these guys that Afrika has, you would think that they would have gotten it together last split. They aren't a team where I'm like, oh, with an off season, these guys will figure it out. Like, they had a lot of veterans on the team. I would have thought they would have had it figured out last split, and they just made so many mistakes. And then Fred Brion comes out in their first match of the year and gets a pretty decisive victory against a team I really like in Sandbox. Makes it hard for me to be like really excited about being on Afrika either. But I really kind of think Afrika might be the biggest favorite on the slate in my eyes. It's just this slate in general is just really, really wild. The last matchup of the day, Damwon Gaming minus 250, T1 plus 185. So the booked biggest favorite on the slate is Damwon. However, we just saw Damwon, their bot lane especially, really struggling at Worlds. We heard the interview, or not Worlds, at MSI. We heard the interview with Showmaker talking as if he thought this was like they had like a real issue with their performance at MSI, and they haven't played a match yet in the LCK. T1 came out and looked fantastic in their first match. They seem to be sticking with their like best roster. I have a hard time making Damwon Gaming more than like a very small favorite against T1 maybe. I think Damwon for me is like a minus 115, minus 120 favorite. Maybe not even that. Like, I think this is not that far off of an even money matchup. So you're dealing with, I mean, Damwon's definitely looking the weakest that we've seen them in a long time. And T1 looked fantastic in their first matchup. And they're the team that, coming into the split, I said I thought T1 would win this split. I think they have the best team, all things considered. And that's the book's biggest favorite for the slate is Damwon Gaming against T1. Man, this is brutal. And for ownership, that's my biggest problem with this slate. I have no idea where the ownership is going on this slate. I feel like pretty good at reading the room and figuring out like who people have confidence in and who people don't have confidence in. I feel like generally speaking, the world feels kind of like I feel, which is like this matchup should be pretty close. WE's probably a small favorite. LNG versus BLG is closer than this. I just generally feel like the world is feeling the same way that I'm feeling. And if that's the case, then it's really hard to make a prediction about where people are going to put their money. All these teams are so, like every team here is so playable that it just feels like the ownership is going to be extremely split. I think maybe a team like BLG might be a little bit underowned because they're a big favorite, but I think most people recognize that LNG is like a pretty good matchup against them. I think a team like Suning could be underowned, but I don't want to say that I think the underdogs will be the higher owned teams, especially not when you're dealing with a lot of these sites that do their projection like Vegas-based models. Vegas-based models are going to treat Suning and BLG like they're fantastic plays compared to like WE and LNG. So if that's the case, then I mean there has to be some more ownership for the favorites. So I have a really, really, really hard time figuring out where people are going to put their ownership on this slate. I'm going to take just a guess, and a lot of it's going to be based on the fact that some of the other major DFS sites use that Vegas-based stuff. I'm going to take a shot and say that Damwon is going to be fairly highly owned. I think Afrika is going to be pretty highly owned. Afrika seems like the safest team on the slate, but man, I mean, again, coming off a win for Fred Brion, I have the hardest time with this slate. I was looking at this for a while this morning, and I cannot figure out what the ownership is going to look like. I'm going to go Suning, BLG, but I don't think BLG is going to be that high. I kind of think we're going to see like LNG and WE mixed in here. WE maybe even higher. With maybe T1 further towards the bottom. I think Fred Brion will be the lowest owned team on the slate. As exciting as Fred Brion first victory was, I think they'll be the lowest owned team. But the rest of this, honestly, this other 7 spots, I have a really hard time figuring out where the ownership's going to be. This is the hardest slate for that I've ever seen in DFS. When it comes to GPPs, I kind of said it earlier, but I think you could play literally any 2 teams, including double underdogs. And in fact, if I was playing the $15 or $20 today, and I will be, I think I would play only double underdog lineups. At least I think that's probably what I'm going to be doing. Because I think all of the underdogs are pretty close to 50% and have a reasonable chance to score well. Maybe I do like a little bit of like a Freaka with WE or a Freaka with LNG or a Freaka with T1. But I'm going to play mostly double underdogs, I think, just to try to take advantage of the ownership leverage. It just feels like there's too many possible double underdog combinations that can win on this slate, and they're obviously going to be the lowest owned combinations. So I think I'm going to try that for big GPPs. For cash, I feel like I have to play a Freaka. They just feel like by far the most likely team to win. But I don't even know who you pair him with. Can you really play like an underdog with them in cash? Because I mean, like, I really kind of think WE's a reasonable favorite there. I really don't want to play Damwon. I just don't feel like Damwon's going to win. This might be a day where I would just not play cash and just devote more of my energy towards GPP, because there's just so many things that could happen on this slate. But let's throw down some possible lineups. So I think for me, I think you have to play a Freaka in cash. They're just the only team that I have confidence in. Like, that's a favorite. And I don't have a ton of confidence, but they're like the only team I have any confidence in. So let's see, they're pretty expensive though. Let's see how they work out, and then I'll come back in a minute and see if maybe we need to look at some other options. Freaka BLG, you get a mid captain 3/3. You can switch though. You can get a 4/2. So probably that, which is 609.2. That's a pretty good number. If you did a Freaka Sunning, I mean, I really don't want to play Sunning. I just feel like Sunning's not going to win this matchup. I'm just not even going to consider that. If you believe in Damwon, a Freaka Damwon gets you a top lane captain 4/2. Keen captain 589.6. And then I guess I can look at BLG Damwon just in case, but I mean, I don't really feel like that's a viable lineup either. Weiwei captain 4/2, 584.9. If we look at, let me put all the favorites back in again real quick. Where does a Freaka stack up? Third, first, second, first. So yeah, I think you just have to play Freaka. I mean, for a Freaka with BLG maybe. Zika, Bew. I'm just trying to think of these rosters. Like, is BLG really better than LNG? I really don't think they are. I kind of think LNG and WE should be favorites here. Obviously, if you pair a Freaka with any of these other teams, Damwon's in here. If you pair a Freaka with any of these underdog teams, you should be able to just get an 80 carry captain with 4 of them. Bang. Light. Yeah, there's 1,200 left over. You can easily switch over to Lehens. Yeah, I'd go with something like that, 616.8. Or you could do it with WE. And you probably do make the change over to Keen. WE team, 618.5. I think maybe you just avoid heads up. If I'm going to play heads up, I think you play this Freaks BLG lineup, the 609.2. But if you skip, instead of playing heads ups, if you play 4-mans and just play like a Freaka and WE or a Freaka and LNG or a Freaka and T1, I think any of those are like viable lineups. With T1, you can get whatever you want. I might avoid T1 just for the random off chance of roster changes, even if I do think that they're like a very good play. For GPP, I think it's safe. I think they're going to probably run the same lineup, but just in case for cash, I think maybe I wouldn't. But you can play 4-mans with WE or LNG paired with your Freaka, and I think that's reasonable. this is just, like I say, I mean, I have a tough time with even talking about this slate because there's just so many things you could do. You can literally play just any combination of the two teams, and cash, there's just nobody I have any confidence in. I know I'm just saying the same things over and over again, but it's every time I start thinking about like, well, I could do this, I'm just like, man, is that really a good play? The only thing that I think for cash is that I think I'm going to have four Afrika in there. So it feels like this, with a combination of four mans with WE and LNG, has to be the way to go. For GPPs, man, have fun. Pick two teams you like and shove them in there because I think everybody's got value on this slate. The ownership's going to be super split. I really have a hard time seeing one team having like dominant ownership on this slate. The one thing that I'm concerned about is like I have like WE down in fourth and LNG in fifth. I could foresee a world where, like in the $15 or $20, one of these two teams is really overowned, either WE or LNG. It's like I said, it's hard to keep the pulse, but the pulse generally feels to me like everybody feels like these teams are pretty good plays. And if it turns out that, like, you know, if you have 100 people and they all think these are good plays, if they all happen to decide to land on LNG, or most of them decide to land on LNG, even though they both think they're good plays, then you could see really high ownership out of either LNG or WE. But this is just a crazy slate, man. Just have fun, play whatever you feel like playing for GPPs, because it's all good. You could can't find two teams that are bad. You could play Fred Brion WE, Fred Brion LNG, Fred Brion T1. I think those are all great lineups for the big GPP tonight. So do whatever you feel like, fam. And the one thing I will say is this is a slate where maybe if you think you can find a combination of underowned favorites, like a Suning BLG, that could be something. If lots of people are going to be on these two teams as underdogs, maybe you want to throw some Suning BLGs in there and try to take advantage of what could be much lower ownership on those two teams. Just a thought. Damwon maybe, another team that might not have as much, maybe Damwon Suning or Damwon BLG. People might not be as likely to be on those, given how many sweet underdog options there are today. Sometimes you want to zig where others are zagging. So I think for me, probably, I actually might not play any favorite underdog lineups in the big GPPs. I might just go with all double underdog or those weird combinations of double favorites that I think could be underowned. That's how I'm looking at it tonight, guys. Let me know what you do, man. Feel free. Drop me a message on like Twitter or Discord or something. Let me know what you think about this slate, because I think this is one of the most interesting slates we've ever had in years of DFS. For 4 games where none of them have a decisive winner is a true rarity. So that'll be all for me today, guys. Good luck. I hope I was at least somewhat helpful for you to try to figure out what's going on with this slate. And some smart lineups are going to win tonight. I have a feeling. Whatever lineups win tonight, I have a feeling I'm going to look at them and go, that's a pretty solid lineup. So I appreciate you guys. Have a good rest of the day. Good luck tonight. Let's get them.